Hi, I'm Paul Denegris. I'm a VFX artist, filmmaker, and film educator. I've made independent films. I've worked on VFX for film and TV projects, and I taught digital filmmaking at the university level for about 20 years. Now I run a boutique visual effects studio called Foxtrot X-Ray, and we specialize in serving independent filmmakers and helping them use visual effects to tell their stories. And that's what this podcast is about, the intersection between independent filmmaking and visual effects. Welcome to the VFX for Indies podcast. With me today are Sean Oliver and Drew Latham, the creators of a charming horror comedy haunted house movie called Forever Home that my team and I were privileged to work on and produce about 100 visual effect shots for. Welcome to the podcast, guys.
Hi, thanks for having us.
So before we jump into Forever Home, and there's a lot to talk about there, let's give the audience just kind of a quick overview of who you guys are, what you've done, and what led you to make Forever Home as a debut feature.
Sure. So my name is Sean Oliver, and I co-wrote the script with Drew, and I directed it and also edited it. I'm a independent filmmaker. This is my very first feature film. Prior to that, along with Drew, we've made a couple short films. Our last very successful one called Imaginary Bullets, which actually played at a special screening sponsored by the Red Cross over in Japan about a couple years ago. I'll let Drew introduce himself a little bit.
My name's Drew Latham. Co-wrote the script with Sean, produced the film, and acted in the film. I'm a piano teacher and a performer by trade. Been teaching piano for almost 10 years now, and have acted all around the southwestern states. Probably some of my favorite gigs with Flagstaff Shakespeare Festival here in Arizona, and some of my just favorite memories. Basically have been really excited to kind of go through our little history here, and what I want to share is kind of like almost 5 years back now, pre-quarantine, and it wasn't paid. It's not the thing that is even that most important to my career, but a long time ago, I made the final round of callbacks for Blue Man Group. And that's just the memory. I've been in more intense auditions. I did my first feature film before, called House of Quarantine, before Forever Home. That one I just acted on. It was nice to actually do a little bit more. But it's funny. People ask me for like, what's the most important thing? I was like, it was just these really weird auditions in Chicago, like before COVID. And I keep like coming back to that room, and it's just important memories. So yeah. But I've been acting for 10 years as well, and really excited to make this indie feature and talk about all the visual effects.
Yeah, so Forever Home, like Paul said, is a horror comedy, and it's kind of that classic setup about a young couple who purchase a new home only to realize that it's haunted. But kind of switching up some of those tropes, instead of it always being such a scary fest, it's actually more annoying. It's more comedic. It's like having bad roommates in a lot of ways. And they do uncover some deeper mysteries in the house as they continue to live in it. But a lot of it came from just that idea of really wanting to make something that was very achievable for us at our budget and resource level. So it was very much that exercise in writing a smaller script with a smaller cast. Drew co-wrote it with me, and he's one of the leads. So that was something that made it very easy for us to work together and to craft that together. And even our other leads were performers and actors that we've worked together for the last 10 years over short films. So it was kind of a community of us finally coming together to produce something a lot bigger than we had in the past.
So it sounds like kind of your film and acting tribe that you've put together for years and years and years. And
yeah, almost a decade.
Yeah, that's a recurring theme. A lot of the guests that I've brought on, they talk about, we were making our first feature, and it was who are the people that we've been working with all this time, and who are the people that we found along the way that were like, hey, you need to come and do this project with us. And it's very much about finding your tribe and finding common vision to jump
Yeah.
into the craziness of making an independent film, because
It's always felt very similar to like playing like a Dragon Age, but for filmmaking, of like an RPG. You got to find your party, and you need your archer, and you need your mage, and your camera person, and your grips. And I think it's hard for people who want to just jump start straight into a feature, and you don't have a party. And it's like, you want to go kill a dragon? Like, are you like, maybe you can.
And it's just you.
It's a little bit easier to hunt that dragon when you've got a good team of people behind you.
People you can count on.
Right on. How long was the whole process of making Forever Home? So pre-production, production, post. Kind of break that down into those segments.
So some of it really started to gestate kind of in the early COVID. It was an old idea that I had written down, which was just this idea of, really it was roommates. So it was roommates who move into a new house, and literally I lived with a friend of mine. We moved to like 3 or 4 different houses together, and every time we would go somewhere, you spend all your money on your deposits, and it was like, well, if this place is haunted, we're just gonna have to make it work. And we always would say that if this one's haunted, like, oh well, like I guess we're stuck with the ghost. And that was just a joke between us, and I had it written in a Word document. And then sometime in COVID, the lead, Sammy Ladine, at the time was living in New York, but she had come back home during COVID because New York was totally shut down. She was actually happened to be in Arizona when the flights stopped. So it was very much, she was like, I guess I'll just stay here. So we knew that we had her in the Valley, and I've always been wanting to work with her more. We had made short films in the past, but she'd been out in New York. And it was almost this like, if we write something, we could work with Sammy like at the tail end before she goes back to New York. And had that idea, instantly thought of Drew, thought of Sammy, thought of our friend Cody, who plays kind of the third lead Max in the movie. And that those few elements really came together to kind of crack the code and make this script that was going to be not only like something we really liked and very, very funny, but like very achievable and something that we could film locally with what we had. And very early brought Drew in. I mean, I think there's a Facebook message at some point that was like, do you guys want to make this movie? And then it was like, yeah. So then Drew just kept bugging me about it. And it was like, well, dude, you just need to just write this. Like, you're on it with me.
Let's make it. And that was probably, I want to say October of 2020, Sean had put some stuff down on the paper, and I read it. And
probably had a first draft March. April?
No, I made a little list just March 18th, 2021, first draft done. First draft, and it changed quite a few times.
Just hit the. I mean, we I would slow things down if we did this again. But Sammy had to go back to New York date, and we were trying to kind of meet that in the fall. So instantly, just started raising money. Started pre-planning while rewriting, because we kind of we know we needed a house. It's a haunted house. It's mostly gonna be one location. We were filming by August 2021.
Yes.
Wrapped
end of August,
in November.
September 3rd.
2021, and then basically took about a year in post for everything to come together to about where we are now.
How many shoot days was it?
It depends on what you call a half day, but it's somewhere. I think we were like right about 19 days. Couple half days that would double up in there. Did it over 3 legs because we're based out of Phoenix, Arizona. And if you've ever been to Phoenix, it's anything that's old, we tear down and build something new on it. So it's hard to believe that there'd be this ancient, oh, it's such an old haunted house. You're like, dude, that house was made in the 80s. So we had to leave town. So we went up to Flagstaff, which just has a bit more of a quaint area. And the house we actually filmed in, I think, was made in like 1905. So we got like a genuine old, could be haunted house.
Very neat. Very neat. And that was an Airbnb that you used?
Yeah. The back of the house owner was an Airbnb. You happen to know. The owner of the house was the creative director of Flagstaff Shakespeare Festival that I mentioned earlier. And she ran the back part as an Airbnb. So Sean had literally gone through a bunch of places on Airbnb, showed me pictures, and I was like, I know that place. Like, let's use that one. And so it's just super easy to book it through her. And then she was also kind enough to let us use the facade of her front as what looked like the actual front where they were staying. And then we just cut into the back house where the Airbnb was.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That didn't even compute for me. It's so seamless. I just
It's
thought it
all
would.
a lie.
Yeah, it's
No, you're
all
in the
live.
That's where
weeds,
the
right?
tarp
You're not
comes
worried about
from.
the entrance. Yeah.
If you've ever in the movie, there's no front door in the house, and they always have to go through this tarp. It's supposed to be an abandoned house. It's a fair thing to happen to it. But that tarp was because the doors did not match the front and the back of the house, and it would give us this seamless kind of cut to cheat and trick the audience. So
Yeah, that's great. Very
But yeah,
ingenious.
almost two and a half years from, or 5 years if you count the roommate joke. 2.5 years of
Yeah.
being a joke to 2.5 years of actually thinking about it and getting it done.
That's actually really astounding. Generally the average for an independent film from concept to completion, the average length is about 10 years, or at least it used to. It's maybe a little quicker now because of digital
I would
tech.
add some onto ours if I could, especially just because we finished, wrote, and just instantly were raising our money. We didn't even actually have money in the bank account in the first weekend, just due to when it was coming in. I always like to say we were racing to the starting line, and then we actually did the race. And that was just how this one had to happen. It was one of those moments of just like we were done waiting for someone to say, "Hey, go make a movie," and we're like, "No, we're gonna go make a movie, and we're gonna make that happen." And I think that was an important kickstart for us to just go and maybe even do things maybe a little faster than we even should have, just because the alternative was waiting and not doing anything at all.
Right. Well, you had put in your work, all your reps, your initial getting geared up, making shorts and doing them well, and you guys had sort of hit the ceiling for what you could achieve in the short form. So this was the obvious next step for you to jump into.
So, no, it is a little bit that sensation of building the plane while it's in the air, but I forget that we built jetpacks first, right? That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Like we cut our teeth in a certain way. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So it's a haunted house movie with ghosts. Visual effects were going to be part of it from the get-go. At what point did you realize during the writing process that there would be a lot of visual effects involved? And to add to that, what was your experience like with VFX prior to this? Had you used VFX on shorts, and so you kind of were aware of it? How did that factor in?
So we did a web series for a long time called Lucidity, which takes place in the dream world, and it's a web series about two roommates who share each other's dreams. So we had a ton of lo-fi visual effects over the course of 5 years of making that show. We never reached the likes of what Foxtrot does and other people create, but it gave us like a really good foundation of understanding masking, keyframes. Just like even if you're not able to execute the effect the perfect way, you still know what those steps are from having that experience in the past. So we were very conscious while writing. And we'll talk more about some of the specific effects, but like the red gloves, which are these floating red ghost gloves that are in the movie. I always knew a couple different ways that we might achieve it. Not even just like, only I have to know exactly how we'll do it, but just knowing a rough estimate of like, if we say this is floating, we can make things float. We know how to make things float. And that just comes from that aspect of really writing something that was achievable, doable. The first draft, and even up until you came in, which was a little bit later, was always understood that we were probably going to do the visual effects ourselves. So it was written at a level that worst case scenario, I can gut that out. I can make that happen. I can frame by frame mask that person out. And then as we were able, we over-raised, and we were starting to raise more money, and it was a question of where do we put that, and we put a big chunk of that money into music, which I think was found like super essential to our film, and then into visual effects was that like door that we unlocked by getting a little bit more support coming in. And so all of the effects are on the page, they're in the script, and we're very, very much planned to be in it.
And there's good examples though of just going from draft to draft. Like originally we had a headless cello playing ghost, Right? We're like, oh, we'll figure out, yeah, we'll be able to, but also how does this character play on that? And through draft after draft, eventually getting to production, us just being like, this isn't going to work. What's something simpler we could do? And ending up doing something more practical with just an aquarium pump and water. So there were certain things we were still worried about. It's not like we were like, oh, we'll figure everything out with just After Effects, but that relationship varied as we got closer to shooting.
Yeah, I could tell right from our initial conversations that you guys had put a lot of thought into how VFX were going to be deployed, that there was an awareness of what you were going to need to provide to my team. We weren't starting from scratch sometimes. And part of the reason for this podcast is to help the indie filmmaker who is starting from scratch, who doesn't know, how do I even start with VFX? How do I start the conversation before they even think about coming to an outside vendor? How do I write it? How do I plan for it? How do I shoot it? How do I get on the same page so we can even just talk the same language? And out of the gate, you were on that level, right? You were coming to us and I was like, have you thought about this? Yep. Have you thought about this? Yep. You had kind of had the checklist down.
And I think that comes from what my advice would be to someone who hasn't had any of that foundation is even, you don't have to do visual effects in a short film, but you could just to do test and experiment. And even if you're not going to do them, watch the tutorials, because I think it's true of most film, like any job on a film set. You want to know what you're asking of somebody. And I think it's dangerous when someone just says to their visual effects people, like, and then you'll just you'll cut that out and make it a monster. And I have no idea what that takes. And I didn't light it very well. And my camera is shaky as all hell. And it's got really bad shutter. Like some of these are some of the lessons I learned that we can go through about Forever Home. But it's really helpful to have made mistakes that you found for yourself when you're doing it, and then wanting to avoid that for someone else. Like I always want to serve the best footage I can to my colorist, and I want to have the best, all the best resources for you guys to be working with. But I wouldn't know what that is unless I had done that and myself a little bit. I don't ever plan to do that again, but having just enough of a background to be, it's just like, I've ran sound on a couple of short films, so I'm going to be much more respectful to my sound person and their needs and what they need. And I think that's important to filmmaker if you're going to be on that director side and you're going to be asking these things of all of these people.
Yeah, I firmly believe that every filmmaker currently working or aspiring to work today needs to understand every technical aspect. Doesn't mean they need to be an expert, but if you want to communicate with your colorist, watch some color videos, watch some tutorials about DaVinci Resolve.
It's all usually fun.
Yeah.
Like it's not tedious stuff. It's cool.
Right. Understand the terminology.
To learn about.
Learn the difference between a boom mic and a lav so you can communicate with your sound mixer. Those sorts of things. Doesn't mean you need to be an expert at visual effects. It's just having a little bit of forethought and a little bit of foreknowledge and doing some research. I mean, the internet is a treasure trove of stuff out there for you to learn, So if you're thinking like, oh, I'd like to do this effect that I saw in this movie and I'm writing it in my script, somebody figured it out. If it was in a movie, somebody has figured out how to do it. Either
every Marvel effect, right?
Either the people who did it,
Doctor Strange.
Yeah, either the people who did it have published a tutorial for it, or a channel that's targeting independent filmmakers like Film Riot or something. They have gone and figured out like, okay, how can you do Doctor Strange's portal on no budget? And they've done that. And then you can go, okay, I want to do something like a Doctor Strange portal. Now I understand how to execute it. Doesn't mean I'm going to do it perfect, but at least I can communicate to my team how to get there.
Yeah.
That's fantastic, And obviously you guys, with the amount of work that you've done in shorts and your web series and things like that, like you put in the reps. You really earned your stripes to get to the like you said, you're racing to the start line. You earned your stripes to get there. And it wasn't just a mad dash with no prep. And it showed. It shows in the writing, it shows in the acting, it shows in the music, it shows in every step of the film that you guys put in the time to get good at your craft.
Totally. No, thank you. I'm glad that shows through.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive into the visual effects, because there were a number of different gags that we did in the film. My list, I remember we worked on the gloves, which you mentioned, which we can dive into. All the ghost effects, like ghost appearing, disappearing,
Through walls,
passing through walls, all of that non-corporeal stuff. The energy barrier that's around the house that prevents the ghosts from leaving. The decaying flowers, the box of flowers that turn black, and the doorknob gags. You guys had two conceits in the movie that sort of lampshaded the idea of when characters are in a haunted house, why do they stay? Why don't they just get the hell out of there, right? So you had two things. You had we can't afford to move, and then at one point the house is like, you can't leave anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
Once the characters finally decide we should leave, the house locks down.
Right. That's
so
like, nope.
We got a brand new problem now.
And so we achieved that by some various things that we did to the doorknobs. Did I forget any?
The exploding and recreating bottles.
That's right. That's right. Your Matrix
yes.
Animatrix.
For those of you who have seen the Animatrix, we've got a wonderful Animatrix nod for all 1,000 of you that still remember it.
Right. Well, why don't we start there?
I say it all the time, and people are like, "No, I didn't see it." And I'm like, "Why are we all sleeping on the Animatrix still?"
I love the Animatrix. I mean,
it's still good.
Yeah, the second Renaissance. That's beautiful. Those two.
It's on YouTube.
Dreams.
I don't know why sci-fi filmmakers aren't just still ripping off the Animatrix.
Yeah. Some amazing stuff in there. So yeah, why don't we start with the bottles? So at the beginning of the movie, a couple of kids go into the haunted house, and you go ahead, you describe it.
Do you want to describe the scene?
Oh, sure. Yeah, basically, the couple of elementary school kids, two brothers and their friend, and they come inside. Brother runs away, and the two kids, just weird stuff's going on, but they brought these leftover bottles because Dad had a bad day. And they go ahead, they throw them down onto the rug, and they start breaking. And what you see is that they kind of like fizz in and out, basically. They shatter, and then they kind of hang there suspended, frozen, and then zip back up, almost like they get stitched back together and just fling back with their original momentum right to where they threw them from, and the kids just catch them.
So yeah, we did it with a mix of practical and visual. So we got sugar glass bottles created, and so the kids, which they loved doing, got to actually throw the bottles, and they actually exploded. And then we just got a clean plate, and then that's where you guys came in and did that magic of stopping the explosion. And I think about we definitely had like, how many like should it have? Like, I don't even remember, like, should it like hold and freeze, or does it need to kind of like re-explode, then come back down and re-explode? And it did go through some iterations on the visual effect to kind of get it to that place where it felt warbly enough, I guess.
Warbly, that's a good word.
And then I know that was one where lessons learned on that effect. I think we really should have shot it at a much higher shutter, just because it would have given you a lot more pieces of glass with cleaner edges that you could have cut off. You guys still definitely made it work at the shutter speed that we shot it at, but that was one of my lessons about visual effects and how, like, normally I'm locking that shutter in and leaving it, just in relation to my frame rate.
Right.
But there are these moments where, this shot isn't about getting a cinematic quality out of the picture. This shot is about obtaining data that is going to be manipulated into visual effects later. And that needs different considerations in the settings that we lock in.
Yeah, for me, the thing that I kept bumping on as we were working on it, and we figured out pretty early on that you were going to want to have that control of how much and how far and how many times it sort of like warped in and out. And so I was able to essentially take all those attributes and put them on one slider that I could keyframe. So that worked really well.
Nice.
And I could even like add a wiggle expression to it, so I could have some randomness to it. So like it starts here and it ends here, but in between it's just going to sort of fluctuate and do its thing.
Nice.
But what I was bumping on was when the bottle hits and breaks apart, in order to convincingly sort of suspend them in air, I felt like I needed some frames where there was no motion blur. Right. And that's where the shutter speed comes in. Is like they were flying outwards. So they had this motion blur trail behind them. I wanted to be able to sort of freeze it, turn off the motion blur, and then have motion blur go the opposite direction as it came back together. And I was sort of limited in terms of what I could do and how
100%.
Yeah.
Like, and that was like, that is really like a foundational lesson I took from Forever Home.
Yeah.
Like with that, also that I don't know why we didn't get an awesome punch in and break another bottle for a close up. I just think that would have been cool to have gone into a close up of the warble. But it's all done in a master and a wide shot,
right?
Which is good because you get the kids' reactions and that's nice,
right? And it's
that's my other regret.
It's
a nice punch in.
I get it. It would have been a really cool thing to show off, the effect. But what works really well in the master is that the two kids, their frame rate and their reaction stays normal.
Yeah.
Right. So they're still doing their thing and reacting to it as if it's happening on set. And then we're manipulating. So time is playing differently on the floor than where the kids are standing.
Seeing that relationship does help.
Yeah, I think it helps to sell it as this quote unquote happened in camera.
Yeah.
Instead of being effect. And it's a subtle thing, but I think it works really well. And then the sound that you guys did for the break and the reassembly works well. And then the one kid he forgets that it's coming back at him.
He throws it and then he gets distracted. So when it comes back, it just dunk.
Beans him right in the head. Yeah, and so that works really well too.
And the sound that was a sound design element. We had to wait till we had the effect, right? Because we needed to score it basically to the movements, and it's like 10 layers of different kinds of glass noises.
Yeah, it works really, really well. Let's dive into the ghosts, because that's another big thing. And you mentioned when we were talking about the bottles here, you mentioned something called a clean plate. Obviously, I know what a clean plate is. You know what a clean plate is, but maybe somebody watching this doesn't know what a clean plate is. So what did you mean by a clean plate?
So this would be a clean plate.
Where'd it go?
So if we were doing a visual effects shot, and we wanted a shot of me beaming in like a Star Trek or something like that. If we got the shot of me acting like I'm beaming in, and then we got this background, if you think about cutting me out of a shot, if we don't have that background clean and you chop me out, there's going to be a big black hole where I'm supposed to be. But if we have this shot where it's on the same shot from the exact same angle, tripod hasn't moved, lighting's the same, when you chop me out, you stitch back in that other piece of the wall and it looks seamless, like nothing is suspiciously happening, and that would be a clean plate. So like we had to use those. We have a ghost character with the red gloves we talked about. And that's a person in a green suit and they've got the red gloves on them, and then we can just erase all of the green, and then the background fills in itself with the plate. I don't know if that's the best explanation.
No, I think that's the easiest explanation, as non-technical as we can make it. But you're right. We used clean plates everywhere. We used it for the bottle gag. We used it for the red gloves. We used them for anytime ghosts walk through doors, walk through walls, or doors pass through them. There's one point where the door swings and it swings through the kid ghosts. Yeah. Trying to think of some other places we might have used clean plates. You guys shot a ton of clean plates. It seems like you shot about
almost every effect was kind of paired with a plate.
Yeah,
honestly,
probably 60% of the movie you guys shot every shot twice.
And that's one of the funny tells sometimes where and it changes how we shoot the shots around it, because I don't want to be handheld, and then suddenly we're like on a tripod clean plate. But we shot all of our plates on a tripod to make ssure that it could get the cleanest cut out. I remember talking to you early on. You were even like, well, if there's some shots you want camera movement, like, don't be afraid of it. And I was like, no, it's going to be locked down. And to make it, I knew how many red glove shots there were going to be, which I should have looked up the number before this, like 30 or so. Like, it was a lot of shots with the floating red gloves. And I knew that with having like a stable lockdown clean plate, it was going to make it a lot easier on your guys' end.
Yeah. And I mean, that's not to say they were without their challenges. Obviously.
Yes. Yeah. No.
Right. Even when you're shooting a clean plate, there were inconsistencies in lighting. And it was mainly because you had a 6-foot person in a green suit acting in the scene with the red gloves, casting his shadow and casting green bounce all over the kitchen or whatever. And then when you key him out and try to drop the clean plate into the hole that we feed out,
shadow here.
Yeah, you're cutting shadows and all of that. And so a lot of those shots we ended up, the clean plate became, instead of just a filler to fill in the hole where we pulled the green out, so we'd have the man-shaped hole where the green suit was. Instead of just plugging clean plate in there, we would actually rebuild the shot with the clean plate as the source.
That makes sense.
And so then that added
like
a
the
whole
reverse.
Yeah, it was kind of the reverse. So we were still keying the green suit, but we weren't as concerned with like the edges of the green suit. We were mostly concerned with where the gloves met the green suit, and keeping that clean. And then we ended up having to rotoscope, hand trace the fingers and stuff on the red glove. We could like pull a key on the red because it was unique enough that we could get like the beginning of a mat. But there was a lot of manual, frame by frame fingers, and your red glove guy can't talk. And so he's gesturing wildly, and you can see.
Yeah. It's probably another one that a higher shutter would have been really nice.
Again, yeah. So it's a lot of rebuilding. You can see like my fingers are blurring like crazy. When you have that happen, you end up having to create hard edge mats around the finger and then rebuild manually the motion blur around it as it moves. So those shots, they definitely were much more complex than just like. Well,
and you guys took
click an eyedropper on the green guy and it's done.
Oh, 100%. And even when we filmed him, I knew we have a green suit, but it wasn't lit in a way that was ever going to be what it was. It would just give a hard cutoff line, where that person is for. Even if we were doing it on our end, it would have been rotoscoping frame by frame, cutting it out with a mask.
Yeah.
Was always kind of the way.
Yeah.
And then you guys really took it a step much further than we ever would, and it's kind of that level up that you guys were able to add to us. Is the shadows of the hands are just the extra depth of an effect that make it go from this 2D pasted on effect to something that's in that world. Because obviously there's this 6-foot man attached to every shadow with the gloves. There is no floating glove shadow, but when you guys watch the movie, and hopefully you will, because of the way that we lit where the shadows are coming from, your team always matched that and added it, and it just put so much presence on the gloves and so much immersion from the effect.
Thanks. Yeah, the trick with that is, now we have the mat, the outline of the gloves, right? And so then it's just a matter of taking that and duplicating it and using it as a mask for a color effect to darken and create the shadow on the plate behind. And we always had the reference. Your original plate with the green suit gave us the reference of where the shadow of the hands fell, but we were rebuilding those shot by shot. And when he was against just a blank wall, it was no problem. Like those are relatively easy. There's a couple of places where the shadows sort of like, hit the counter and kind of like travel wall, side of cabinet, front of cabinet, top of counter, and it does this sort of like 3-dimensional thing. And it's cheating. We had to cheat. We didn't like build a bunch of geometry for those things. It was like simple 2D manipulations to kind of make it follow the contours. But thankfully, those are few and far between. The other thing we discovered pretty early on was when you've got the back of the glove and now the hand inside it is supposed to be invisible. We'd get this line.
You have to fill that hole somehow.
We'd get a line for the edge of the glove, but nothing on the interior. So we ended up building. What did you guys call it? The glove.
We called it the glove anus.
Yeah.
It was like, oh no! Like, and whenever another one came up, because we were trying to avoid that on set. Yeah. And it's one of those ones where if you had asked me, I'd have been like, we did a really good job. And then we're looking at all the shots.
But then you go back.
There's another one. Yeah. There's another one. I'm like, oh, there's another glove anus we have to send to Paul. And it's one of those ones, it could have been a lot worse if we, without our background. In the green suit was Cody.
Right.
And he's the guy that I did almost all those visual effects with, and all of our short films and our web series. So he kind of, him and I have like a little mini effects supervisor hat that we can wear on set of knowing. We tried our very best not to ever cross behind. So if we have a green screen arm and I have my red glove, I'm like covered in dog fur now. I can bring my hand up here. That's fine because you're just going to cut out what's behind it. But if I go back here, you're going to have to rebuild every piece that you don't see.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we were overly conscious about that, but we weren't conscious about the glove anus. And it's also just in terms of like learning and lessons. Some of this, if we had just done some more test, and every practical effect in the movie and almost every visual effect in the movie, I would, if I could go back in time, I would have just taken a day and I just would have gotten some test shots. So I think I always stop myself thinking it needs to be a big production. We need to bring out all the lights, do it all the perfect way. But honestly, even just taking my phone out and doing a couple tests with that would have illuminated some of these potential pitfalls that I could have hit.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I definitely recommend when there are complex effects that there's testing. That's something that I will often do with clients on bigger projects. Is we will do proof of concept shots. Here's what we've written in the script. Is this doable? Before we go commit to 50 scenes of this thing, let's figure out if we can actually do it.
Like, okay, it's doable, but never from this angle and that angle.
Right.
And as long as we never do that, we're okay.
Right. There was one shot of the red gloves where he puts his hands on his hips, and his hand,
the finger disappears.
Yeah, his hand goes behind the hip, and so we had to rebuild his hand, and it's you end up taking pixels from before and after it disappears and kind of building a bunch of faux fingers and putting them on there and trying to keep the texture and all of that stuff. It's painstaking, but doable. But it's the kind of thing we did it once. To have done it, multiple times would have been
really painful.
Problematic. Yeah.
And like the red gloves, I think are always an interesting effect that I do reflect on, because you could have done them, or we could have done them in several different ways. You could full CG those gloves and have 100% post manipulation, and they're made in Unreal Engine or whatever, and you do it that way. We could have filmed them on a green screen separately and had really nice, clean, and actually used akin for a lot of it. Mm-hmm. The one benefit that we got, and I think it really is just kind of a question of your budget, we knew that we could always gut it out ourselves, and I think that was why we chose it. But the cool thing that we had was the gloves were always there on set. Yeah. And the one thing I would have added more of, knowing that, is it's so magical when the gloves pick things up, or they shake hands with the character, or they're actually touching stuff. And you can cheat those effects with the other methods. But for an indie film at our level, we never could have afforded to make a full CG gloves look the way they need to look. Sure, if you've got the Marvel money, you can. And even then, they get a lot of flack for some of their effects because they're so overworked and there's so many. But doing it on set with that half practical, half visual effect really adds, I think, for just a moment, people ask themselves again, how did they do this? Which we don't, anytime you watch a major movie, we know how they did it. It's a full green screen. It's a full, like, some of that movie magic of like, how they pull that off. I think we get that with the mix of that on set and that visual effect, like really marrying and supporting one another.
Yeah. When he picks up the duffel bag and dumps it out, or when he's filling the water guns.
Yeah. Or he shakes the character
shakes
away.
hands with Sammy, and they do their secret handshake, and she realizes who it is. And when he gets thrown to the floor, and he kind of like skitters across the floor, and all that's left are his gloves. Like, you feel the weight of the body that you can't see.
Yeah, all the the way that it would, and you'd have to fake that all the other ways.
And it works so well, and you never had to worry about matching lighting because he was in the real lighting.
Yes,
right. Yeah. And a lot of times it's the lighting mismatch that gives the effect away.
It's the tell.
Yeah, it's the tell. And here we never had to worry about that because however you lit the kitchen, that was the same lighting on the clean plate, same lighting on the glove plate, same lighting on whatever
to your point,
picking up. Yeah,
almost to a fault, we didn't change the lighting because really, maybe moving a few things here and there would have helped those clean plates stay, without the shadows.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. We had one other clean plate that gave us a little bit of a problem, and it was there's a shot where two of the living characters and two of the ghosts kind of stomp past camera.
Yes,
right?
I know. Okay, I know.
You know what I'm talking about, and
and
so you have your two human characters, and they close the door behind them, and then the two ghost characters, phase through the door, and as they all sort of stomp past, because now they're moving fast, the camera just really subtly does this little jitter, and so getting it like stabilizing all of that sort of stuff. It's not as easy as it sounds. Like you would think, you just drop a stabilizer on there and just pick a few points, because it was the kitchen. There's all kinds of countertops and stuff you could lock down. But sometimes when there's enough of a jolt on a camera, on digital cinema cameras, you get a little bit of that weird like sensor wobble.
Yeah,
and so the shape of the frame actually changes in a very subtle way. And you don't notice it until you put it up against one that's totally locked down and not moving, and you could see like
looking at it frame.
Yeah, everything is just kind of like got jello-y there when they walk past.
That was definitely one of the drawbacks of being in a house that was built in 1905, because we had that all the time. The anytime we had anyone walk by that tripod, like you just saw that heavy movement.
Yeah, but by and large, the clean plates you guys provided for us made all of those effects possible, because we weren't particularly on the time that the timetable that we were working on, and the budget we were working on, right? If every time a ghost passed through a wall, we were having to build a new clean plate, which you can do. Like we do it all the time. There's always instances where, somebody moves, and so you grab some of the clean plate from here, and then they move, and you grab some of the clean plate from here, and then you do a little paint work in the spot that you never actually could see, and you build a new clean plate. We do it all the time, right? Sometimes there's moving shots or stock shots, and they're like, I want to remove the guy in the red sweater in the background, and you have to do it. It's not a visual effect shot that was planned, but an after the fact fix. So if we had to clean plate every single shot, we'd still be working on it.
Yeah.
Right. So the fact that you shot clean plates, even though I know it had to have slowed you guys down.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Because you do the shot, and then you got to make sure, and then if you change anything, get that plate again, at the tail end. It's just extra shots at the end of the day. But
I think that was always the thing that like indicated people who had done effects work in the past. Be like, oh, we're getting the plate. Like, whereas people, other like us, like some actors would be like, "What are we like? Why haven't we moved on?"
Yeah, they just see this.
Like, why? Why aren't we doing the next setup? Right? Like, why are we taking so? And it's just not like this is saving us hours of work. This 45 seconds is literally saving us hundreds of dollars.
I think a lot of that thought process too, and in trying to save your guys' time, or whoever was going to end up doing our visual effects. We knew before filming that it was you guys. That. The more we could do on our end, the more time you had to spend where you wanted and needed to spend it on your end.
Right.
Because it's like, like you can rebuild a plate, but I would rather you be working on like a really cool flower wilting effect, which we can like talk about in a little bit, right? To open up the opportunity to not having to be doing salvage work, but actual creation work. I think is something that I'll continue to try and do more moving forward instead of that fix it and post kind of mentality. More of the like, no, this is our like, we're saving this creativity to be in post for this moment instead of just like, oh, we'll fix it.
Spending the VFX budget where it matters.
Yeah,
not just on.
That's everything with an indie film, right? You want to pace your dollars in the right spot, and you want it to end up on screen,
right?
And not in the catering budget. But we had really good catering, so actually
delicious,
home
delicious.
Very cool, very cool. So yeah, let's talk about the wilting flowers and the doorknob, and I think that probably and the energy barrier. That's the other thing we haven't covered yet.
Yeah.
Yes,
The wilting
yes.
flowers are a good one because that was an effect that even I knew what it was in words. I don't know if I knew what it was actually in visually. Like until I could like Vulcan mind meld with you, I don't know if we would see it the same way. And I was. It's basically it is actually like a quote unquote real thing. Not the name. We call it a Rosa sacris, but in ghost hunting, there's this idea of taking these white roses. Read about this on the internet, and when there's an evil spirit around, they will turn black. So we use this as kind of our little like beep 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 to find out where the bad ghosts are, and so they start white, and it's a visual effects shot where they needed to turn black. And how exactly they turned black, it wasn't really in the script exactly. Whether we ended up at like a wilting, which is very, very awesome. But I remember one of our earliest meetings on that one, you were kind of like, we're working on this shot, but like we don't have it yet, so I don't know. And then you were like, well, if you want to see what we've done, like these are all what it's not going to look like. And you showed me like an ink drop where it was kind of like ink had dropped on the flowers and it was spreading, but it just had this, I don't know, 2D-ish, like it just didn't work. There was something about it. It's like in concept, I would have thought that would have worked. And then you had, I don't even remember another one. You showed me another version. And then you were like, what I'm really going to end up doing is I'm going to hand wilt these flowers so it looks like a time lapse. So like, manually adding this warp onto each petal. And then it's like this burn of blackness coming into the shot, which was really awesome. But, you told us not to toot your horn, but I'm going to toot your horn a little bit. I was just super impressed. It was super awesome to know that there was work that you guys were doing that we weren't seeing, and that things go across your desk that you send back instead of, even like with us working on like an indie budget, someone could very easily just say, we did one, here it is.
Right.
But to have that level of you caring about it as well meant a very great deal to us as creators to know that there was stuff that you were like, nope, like my name's going on that, like, and that's not where I want it to be yet. And so the final effect that we ended up with, I think, is one of the more custom hand built ones in the movie, and it actually looks like maybe we set some flowers up and did a time lapse and let them wilt.
That was the idea.
It really does.
That's a really good example of manual clean plating, right? Because I wanted to separate, so you have all these petals sort of stacked on each other as the roses are kind of like sitting, and every rose is multiple layers of petals sort of coiled around each other, and then you have multiple roses kind of packed in this box. Well, if I want to take the petals that are in the foreground and have their edge turn black and have them get sort of shrink and wilt and kind of dry out, well, I have to reveal what's behind. And so it's pull this part out. Okay, now paint it out of the back layer, then take the next, and you just are building, multiple levels of clean plates and kind of like extrapolating what does, when I have two petals, this one in the front, what is the one that I can't see in the back? What does that look like? How do I continue this texture that's in this petal down, through this area? So that as this one shrinks and reveals pixels that were never filmed, what does that look like?
They don't exist.
Yeah, they don't exist. So you end up having to build all these clean plates. And then there's a bunch of cheating, like the deep background stuff is just changing color, while the foreground stuff is doing that individual little, manual animated shrinking and warping and discoloring. And it's a lot of smoke and mirrors.
And that's probably like an effect that we couldn't have gotten that same vibe as easily, especially at our budget, had we been handheld, right? That's another one we locked down. We did that on tripod. That gives it just gives a lot more latitude, I think, in the effect. And I've known people that'll do their effects on sticks, and then they'll add a little bit of handheld if they want to get that motion back. But I think, especially if you're newer and you're getting started out on effects, like train up on sticks doing your effects, because you can do a lot more. You have a lot more control and power.
A lot more leeway.
Yeah, just be smart about it, right? A lot of people, they do, like you said, everything's handheld, and then this is an effect shot because we're locked off.
And then it goes back to Bourne Identity.
Yeah, like pay attention. There's definitely things you can do. If you wanted to do that as a handheld shot, you could shoot it twice, once locked off, once handheld, and then you build the effect on the lock off and then take it and track it into the handheld, right?
I didn't know that.
But you have to be smart about it. You have to be smart about it and
genius.
Shoot it.
Yeah.
So if the camera,
guess what, you're going to get a lot of my next movie.
camera's doing a lot of, sort of this movement up here, your stick shot isn't down here or up, right? It's got to be, you basically find the average, the midpoint of where that is. And that's where you plant it and shoot your lock off.
That's cool.
Yeah. Another trick is to shoot, let's say you're mastering in 4K, but your camera can shoot in 6K. You shoot 6K, so then you have a lock off in 6K, and then the work that's done on that. And then you also shoot, a handheld version that now we can track. So we have this 6K overscan version. We do the effect on it. And then we add the camera movement and then just chop off the edges. So now we have a 4K handheld camera with an effect that was done on a locked off plate inside it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's just being smart about these sorts of things. And again, it's trial and error. It's experimenting. It's planning. It's talking to somebody who knows what they're doing. It's watching tutorials so that you're not going into it blind. You're going into it smartly. I like I said, I never want to be the person who tells the director, no, you can't move the camera. Right. I'm always going to, if you say I have to move the camera, okay, then we have to figure it out.
Yeah.
Right? We just have to figure it out. That's VFX's job. VFX's job is never to say no. VFX's job is to say, here's what I can do with the money and time we have.
Yeah. Which you guys were awesome with.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
What other effects?
A couple other effects. We had the doorknob gag.
The energy barrier, I think, is a good one.
Oh, we could talk about the energy barrier. That one was really straightforward.
Was it?
Yeah, it really was. I mean, force fields and things like that are not terribly difficult. That was an effect that really developed the look in post. That was an entirely digital effect. The only practical elements that you did were, so one of the ghost characters gets, I don't want to spoil anything, but he gets yanked through the energy barrier at the end of the movie. The energy barrier is what keeps all these dead spirits from leaving the house, right? That's why it's a haunted house, because they're trapped. And he gets pulled through, and then he burns up, right? Because now he's not being
arms on fire.
Yeah,
a flame.
Yeah, so we ended up having to track all these little chunks of fire onto the actor and all of that. But what sold that effect was you guys basically shoved a smoke tube up his shirt.
Yeah. So we had a smoke machine off to the side, and I thought we were gonna have to make something and build this whole thing, and then I went to Spirit, and it's like smoke machine. Tube for smoke machine to send smoke. I was like, perfect. Buy that. Poke some holes in it. Running up his pants.
Yep.
But again, marrying the visual and the practical, right? So just knowing that, if there's such a difference when smoke gets at someone's eye and it's actually bothering them versus a layer of digital smoke.
Right, and it's casting a shadow on the other actor, and it's
there's texture to it.
Yeah,
helps
the actual light, the way that it hits it. I mean, it's wonderful when you can have it.
Right.
So,
and then the other thing you did as he burns up, you tattered his clothes and added burn makeup to him and burn marks on his shirt. And so that motivated, for us, where the fire needed to go. And kind of as he disintegrates, every one of those little practical pock marks and, burn marks that you guys made on his shirt became a spot where we centered a sort of fire wave that would spread out and erode him. And again, it's a marriage of practical and digital. It's you're not expecting digital to do all the heavy lifting, right? You're capturing in camera what is best captured in camera. You weren't going to light the guy on fire, but you can do
anything that
else.
you can.
Yeah.
So if it's just the smoke, then just do the smoke, right? If it's just fire light, so that there's at least real natural light on their face. That's one thing I would have maybe gone back and added. Like
Yeah.
if I could reshoot this again, I would have had my little LED fireplace light just to get that little bit on them. It was daytime. It wasn't like a huge scene where it'd be a major problem.
Right. If it was nighttime, it'd be a totally different story. Daytime,
But, like,
it works. I actually added some
I
glow on the other.
I thought you did.
Yeah, right, to tie it all together, but it was because it was a daylight scene.
And that's the thing, like, you know, visuals can do every piece of that layer, like you're saying. But if you can just get one layer in camera, it's huge. Like I remember Favreau, when he did Iron Man 2, did like the eye tracking thing where we look in a screen, and the eyes go to what's real first. We intake CG last. So if you can soak the image in enough real things, we're not going to start analyzing, you know, Jar Jar Binks or whatever until the last thing in the shot. Right. And I think that's important to remember when you're like, if this shot is 90% visual effects, my audience is going to start analyzing those pixels pretty quickly all of a sudden. And our brain's very harsh about that.
Yeah, for sure. And I've never actually heard that about Favreau's experiment on Iron Man 2. That's great. The one I always go back to is Peter Jackson on the original Lord of the Rings trilogy. The fact that in this shot, it would be a digital double, and in this shot, it's a stunt person, and in this shot, it's a person, a little person wearing an Elijah Wood mask, and in this shot, it's Elijah Wood with a giant performer wearing Aragorn's coat, you know, and he's mixing and matching all of these different things. So your brain is always sort of dancing around, you know, how'd they do that? How'd they do that?
Like, oh, that's fake, and I know it's fake. I've seen it's fake. It's going to be fake next time.
Exactly.
Keep people on their toes.
Keeping people on their toes, exactly.
The first shot in the CG Lion King is real. The very, very first shot is a live action shot, and the idea was to be like, show you something real to, like, you know,
take you in
beyond whatever else was weird about that.
No, I even remember with the energy wall, just the like artistic direction. I watched the original Independence Day the other day, and that like just that scene where they shoot the coke, right, and that first early energy field. And I was like I remember just not being sure how to articulate. So I think that's one thing that like I liked having just a list of like, oh yeah, I saw it like this here, and I just really enjoyed the flame, almost like energy. It doesn't look like a hell wall, but it's just like
it could be like alien tech, right? Or like
exactly
like a
right, yeah,
cabin in the woods
like
style,
shields, force
like man-made kind of coming from an. You know, if we just hit the energy source, it would go down. So I think that's where you guys. Because I don't even remember how much direction we gave you on that flame barrier that, you know, stops them. Right. But it's one that I think there's an important effect because it carries narrative weight. You know, we try not to over explain things via dialogue. I don't think anyone actually ever. One character at some point says, like in the backyard, and like, I didn't know you could come out here. And she says all the way from the back gate to the front gate, and that's really. Most that we talk about it, and the rest is when you see a ghost hit it and bounce into it, and you see the ripples go through. So I think that's why I go back to that effect that it's one of our effects that carries, you know, narrative significance. So it was very important that it transcribed what was happening. You know, the audience was able to
and also had its own looked unique in its own way, and was still very clear.
Yeah, thanks. The jumping off point was knowing that character was going to burst into flames as he pulled through it. So that sort of motivated the fiery kind of look, but we didn't want it to be fire. We wanted it to have that energy feel to it. And you had described it being like a membrane that has like, it's like elastic. So as the guy is being pulled, it stretches and then it snaps back
a little bit,
lets him go. So it's a lot of, manual warping to create those sort of, you know, stretchy tendrils.
Looks like tension.
And masking so that, you know, as his arm pushes through, you know, I'm masking his arm, you know, where the barrier is. And so his arm is being placed in front of it, and the rest of him is being placed behind it.
It added a ton of depth with those moments.
Thanks. The other thing I wanted to do was, again, I'm always trying to make it feel like it was captured in camera. Was I wanted to give it the sense of like in the summer here when it's really, really hot and we see those heat waves coming off our asphalt. Like I wanted it to feel like that. Like a little out of focus behind there. The color is shifting, like the wavelengths of light. There's like this color fringing on the edges, and it's very alive, and it's there but invisible. And so you get the sense that it's always there until something disturbs it, and then it like crackles and it distorts, and that's when we can actually, you could point a camera at it and perceive it. Otherwise, you point a camera at it and it's not there. It's not visible. It's not there. Yeah. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. Those are the sorts of challenges that I love because, like you said, it's a story point. Your movie needs it to tell the story, right? Your movie needs it to be convincing, to be real. There's a big emotional scene around that.
Yeah, our climax happens around this effect in many ways.
And that's the thing I love about working with independent filmmakers is I get to, as a visual effects artist, I get to partner with you guys, and help you tell your story. It's not just being a hired gun. I do plenty of that where I'm a hired gun.
Erase this glare.
Yeah. Erase this glare. Erase the boom pole. We see the crew in the side of the SUV.
We had one boom removal.
Yeah. Yeah, you had one boom.
We had one. So kudos to our sound guy Nick. That's a pretty good job. Only one.
Yeah, I mean that sort of work. That's bread and butter work. We love that. We'll do that all day long. We don't love it. We like having the work. We don't necessarily love the work that we do, right? But it's stuff like this where we get to play jazz in a way.
Yeah,
you're like, here's the note I need to hit. Get me there, and.
No, I didn't get a comment with the Rosa Sacris. It was just going through those iterations with you. Because I remember, thinking, okay, so I'll get this syringe. I'll just fill it up with black ink and we'll, green duct tape it into the roses or whatever. And and then seeing it come back with, ink, I was like, oh, whoa, that's, the digital. And then it was just, it was such a moment of relief. Of just seeing literally the work that you are doing, not just hard keyframes and rotoscoping, but creatively as well, and being man, oh whoa, we went to some of the same places throughout that process,
trying to
and
crack the effect and figure out what works about it.
Yeah, and a lot of that it comes back to you guys. It comes back to how you communicated your intent, what you wanted, the style you were going for. There were never. Other than a couple of things where we were trying to figure out what it looks like when ghosts pass through solid matter, we really didn't hunt for looks on this show. We were very much on the same page right from the get-go, because you were very, very clear and concise and had references and showed me footage and showed me pictures and said it's like this movie but different. It's it's like this but in this color.
This is what inspired it, right? So you can kind of at least see.
Yeah, right. That ability, not only the preparation that you guys did on your shorts, but then the ability to clearly communicate. And that's if filmmakers take one thing away from this podcast on this episode and every episode, it's plan well, communicate well.
Yeah.
Right. Your team can't read your mind. Okay. And we burn a lot of time working for clients who are like, I don't know what I want, but I'll know it when I see it.
Yeah.
You guys were never that. You guys were never ever that.
I think sometimes people, especially directors, they think the job is having cool ideas, and the job is actually is being able to share those cool ideas and to share the vision. It's not having. I think most people have really awesome ideas, and if they were empowered and they could make really awesome stuff. But that hard part is getting it from here to there. And that comes we come from a heavy theater, speech and debate background, and I always tell all directors, my encouragement to them is to take a public speaking class, to take things that force you to put your thoughts down in a coherent way, other than just screenplays, right? And always trying to be the auteur who has this perfect vision, and instead how can I just be a better communicator? Because that's ultimately what the job is being a communicator.
Man, that is a great place to put the button on this show and wrap up. So real quick, what's going on with Forever Home as far as festivals and possible distribution? What's happening there?
We're still at the very front end of our film festival circuit. So we did the Phoenix Film Festival just a couple of months ago. We did a Horror Hotel over out in Ohio just this past weekend. So shout out to all those folks.
Yeah.
We have Days of the Dead coming up in Indianapolis in 2 weeks, and that has another component in August where we're screening in LA. And then really a lot of the festivals we'll start hearing back when it gets closer to Halloween, because we are a horror comedy,
and fall,
and that's where our audiences are and are hopefully waiting for us. And distribution, sometime in the next year, there's going to be news for sure about that, and we're going to get it out and as many people as we can. So follow Forever Home Movie. That's what we are on Instagram. That's what we are on Facebook, foreverhomemovie.com. And you can keep up with all the good news that comes out with it.
Awesome.
Thanks for making magic, Paul.
Thank you for letting me play in your sandbox.
Oh, yeah. You're invited back anytime.
Looking forward to doing it again. All right. Well, thanks to Sean Oliver and Drew Latham for being part of today's show. Hopefully you enjoyed it and learned something. I know I did. It's always a blast talking to these guys and talking VFX. So tune in again next time for the VFX for Indies podcast. Meantime, if you learned anything, if you enjoyed yourself, please click like, click subscribe, post a comment. If you have questions you want us to answer in future episodes, I'd love to hear about it. So please hit those comments, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.